Welcome to the Explainer. Have you ever looked at a nonprofit and wondered what really separates a board that's making a huge impact from one that's just, well, spinning its wheels? Today, we're diving into insights from a panel of experts at Stanford to uncover those secrets. We're going to look at the 4 pillars that really matter: the mission, the people, the work, and the mindset. You know, when we talk about governance, it's so easy to get bogged down in rules and regulations. But according to the experts we're following, that's not the right way to think about it at all. Real effectiveness isn't about taking off boxes on a checklist. It's about getting to the heart of a few core principles that actually fuel real, lasting change. So where do we even begin? Well, it all starts with the single most important element: the mission. And I don't mean just some fancy sentence on a plaque in the lobby. We're talking about the living, breathing heartbeat of the entire organization.
Wow, that old saying is pretty blunt, isn't it? But it's honest for a reason. It points to a fundamental truth. A nonprofit starts to fail the moment its leaders, the board, lose their connection to its purpose. If that mission statement is just a bunch of words, or if the board just isn't fired up about it, the whole thing starts to decay from the top down.
So the key then is to make sure that mission stays alive. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. The board needs to be constantly coming back to it, making sure everyone involved gets it, and this is the most important part: really taking that mission to heart. It has to feel personal for every single person in that room. All right, so an energized mission is the foundation. That's step 1. But you absolutely need the right people to build on top of it. Assembling the board? Well, that's the next critical piece of the puzzle, and it's definitely part art and part science. This is probably the #1 question people ask. Is there some magic number of members for a perfect board? The panel gets this question all the time, and their answer, it might actually surprise you. Yeah, it turns out there is no magic number. A tiny board can be totally dysfunctional, while a huge one can be incredibly effective. The real key isn't the size, it's the engagement. Here's the rule of thumb you should actually care about. Make sure no more than 10 to 15% of your board members are inactive. That's the metric that truly matters.
And beyond just being engaged, who is actually in the room is everything. You're looking for a mix of what the experts call the 3 Ws. People who bring their work, their wealth, and their wisdom. But just as important, you need intellectual diversity. You want people who will challenge ideas, not a room full of bobbleheads. Oh, and here's a huge pitfall to watch out for: the person who joins because they want to learn, but they're not ready to actually lend their own expertise. That's a massive drain on the organization.
Okay, so having the right people around the table is a giant leap forward. But their real value, their real impact, comes down to what they actually do together. How a board spends its time is what separates the great from the mediocre. Come on, we've all been in that meeting on the left, right? Where someone just reads a giant report at you for an hour, and there's no time left for any real conversation. The goal is to be the meeting on the right. A truly effective board assumes everyone did their homework beforehand. That way, you can use that precious time together for a deep strategic dive into 1 or 2 really critical topics. And to help everyone focus on what's really important, one expert, Susan, suggests creating a dashboard. I love this idea. Think of it just like the dashboard in your car. It's a simple, at-a-glance tool with maybe 5 or 6 key numbers, fundraising goals, enrollment, whatever, that gives the whole board a shared snapshot of the organization's health. It helps everybody stay strategic and avoid getting lost in the weeds. Next up, let's talk about one of the most crucial, and sometimes tricky, relationships in any nonprofit: the partnership between the board and the CEO. When this relationship clicks, it's like magic, but when it doesn't, it can be incredibly destructive. Panelist Jackie uses this brilliant old fable to make a point. You know the one? A person touches the elephant's tusk and thinks it's a spear. Another touches its leg and thinks it's a tree. They're both touching the same animal, but they have completely different experiences. It's the same with a board and a CEO. They're often looking at the exact same organization from totally different angles, and that can lead to some serious misunderstandings if you're not careful. So to make that partnership thrive, role clarity is completely non-negotiable. The board's job is to set the policy, to steer the ship with that big picture strategy. The CEO's job, to take that policy and manage the day-to-day operations. The second those lines start to blur, especially around things like money or staff, you are sailing straight into a storm. All right, for our final section, let's go beyond the rules and the processes. At the end of the day, success really comes down to something much more personal.
We're going to look at the mindset, those intangible qualities that truly define an effective board member. Honestly, these personal traits are more important than any bylaw. They are the 4 pillars of success. You need a deep, genuine passion for the mission. You need a foundation of trust between members. You need the candor to speak honestly, even when it's hard. And you need a real respect for different points of view. Without these, even the most perfectly structured board will eventually crumble. Now, when things get tough, and let's be real, they always do, Jackie warns everyone to avoid getting trapped by what she calls the W family. It's that toxic cycle of wondering what went wrong, worrying endlessly about the future, and whining about all the problems. It is a completely paralyzing loop that gets you absolutely nowhere. Instead, the goal is to consciously shift to the A family. First, affirm what's going right. Acknowledge the wins. That builds positive momentum. Then, assess the situation with clear eyes. And finally, and most importantly, act. Create a plan and move forward. This simple little framework can literally pull an organization out of a crisis and back into productive action. So there you have it, the mission, the people, the work, and the mindset. The principles are pretty clear, and the path forward is right there. So the final question isn't just if your board is ready to act. The real question is, what's the very first step you can take to shift your team from worrying and wondering to affirming and acting? What can you do today?